Mr. Downing.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Through you to the members, and thank you to my colleague, the distinguished minority leader, for his input already on the bill, for his leadership on issues around energy and climate, and for his thoughtfulness both in his remarks and in the several amendments he may or may not have offered in the process. I want to thank you as well, Mr. President, along with the Chair of Ways and Means and her staff and my colleagues for their input thus far in what has already been a collaborative process by which this body has sought to respond to two not insignificant problems that we face. Those two, which we know well, are worth restating again. First of all, there is the challenge of meeting our requirements as established under the Global Warming Solutions Act, the requirements for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, those targets which were reaffirmed by the Kane decision, among others, and which this legislature acted on, and also the problem of dealing with regional retirements of baseload energy facilities, the retirement of one phase of our electric grid, and continuing the transition to the next phase of our electric grid. On that first problem, this is an issue which has been identified not just by the Baker administration, but one that had been identified by the Patrick administration in their Climate and Clean Energy Plan as part of the solution for getting to our 2020 goals and beyond. The Patrick administration had highlighted the need for a significant infusion of clean energy and electricity into our grid. The number that they highlighted, which is also the number that the Baker administration highlighted, is 18.9 terawatt hours of electricity. Depending on the source of electricity, something close to 1,200 megawatt lines. Obviously, that varies depending on capacity factor of the source and depending on overall use patterns throughout the region. But that has been a consistent, both in the Patrick administration to the Baker administration. On regional retirements, thanks largely to the changing economics of gas versus coal and oil, and also thanks to the leadership of the Obama administration and their Environmental Protection Agency, and to the leadership of this legislature and the surrounding region through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, we have seen the economics of older plants change significantly. According to the Independent Systems Operator of New England, according to the ISO, there are 4,200 megawatts of baseload energy generation which are planning on retiring right now. There are 6,000 megawatts that are expected to retire or at risk of retirement very soon. And the Independent Systems Operator has highlighted the need for non-gas resources, especially in the winter. So we are faced with these two problems, either which would be thorny enough to deal with, but both of which we must tackle together, because if we just focus on one or the other, we will not do so in the most effective way possible. So how do we aim to tackle these two public policy challenges together? Through several steps. The first is by continuing Massachusetts' leadership in investing in renewables. Massachusetts has been among the leaders throughout the states of promoting clean energy, of investing in clean energy. In 2007, in January of 2000, we only had 2 megawatts of solar energy in all of Massachusetts. All of us probably have multiples of 2 megawatt projects in our district today. We are running up against our 1,600 megawatt goal, and certainly we will talk about that some later in this discussion. So we need to continue to invest in renewables. Before I say how we do that, it should be said the legislature made a decision in 1997 to restructure our electric market. That decision was to go away from the vertically integrated utility monopoly model where the transmission and the distribution, along with the ownership and the purchasing of energy, was all within one vertically integrated utility. The legislature made a decision to transition away from that. Over time, we saw a great change in our electric markets in New England. We had more of a market-based system for procurement. We have, over the past few years, as we have thought about how to tackle the combined issues of Global Warming Solutions Act compliance and of dealing with regional retirements, thought about ways that Massachusetts can be a part of restructuring that market to meet these shared goals. I will tell you, we have asked folks who are opposed to some of the steps that we will take in this legislation to come forward with alternative ideas. We have not been able to come up with a solution that we think goes with the existing market the way it is right now. We have not been able to come up with a solution that allows us to solve these two problems within the structure of the market as it is now. So, back to renewables. We propose two separate procurements, similar to, again, what Governor Patrick proposed, similar to what Governor Baker proposed, but more similar to what our colleagues in the House proposed, where they proposed a procurement for clean energy resources along with a separate procurement for offshore wind. The House version of the bill proposed a procurement for clean energy resources at 9.45 terawatt hours. The Senate's proposal will be for 12.45 terawatt hours. When it comes to offshore wind, the House had proposed 1,200 megawatts of offshore wind, a significant increase in the first time that we have had a specific procurement for offshore wind. The House proposal is a significant step. They deserve a great deal of credit. Based on the University of Delaware study and others, we thought it wise to go a little bit bigger and go to 2,000 megawatts of offshore wind. Taken together, that 12.45 terawatt hours of clean energy resources and the 2,000 megawatts of offshore wind get us very close to that number that both Governor Patrick and Governor Baker had highlighted as the need in the region and the need to hit those 2020 GWSA goals, 18.9 terawatt hours of clean energy resources. We make changes in the procurement to how others have envisioned them. On clean energy resources, and this will be a recurring theme throughout this bill, we sought to encourage as much competition as possible. So hydro, large-scale hydro, can bid in to the clean energy resources procurement. Class 1 renewable resources can bid in on their own if they so choose, or the two could partner together. That is the most expansive definition of any of the bills that have been considered, and we think it allows the greatest opportunity for in-region resources and out-of-region resources to compete with one another for the awarding of the procurements envisioned under that 12.45 terawatt hour clean energy resources procurement. The bids that come in under that will be evaluated by an independent evaluator that is chosen in consultation with the Department of Energy Resources and the Attorney General, and the award can be for contracts up to 15 to 20 years. On the offshore wind procurement, it should be said that there are no restrictions in the Senate bill on where projects can come from, and under the bill as it is currently drafted, we require 3 solicitations to be made, the first of which will approximately be 400 megawatts. Certainly on both of these sections, like many others, there are amendments offered, and we look forward to the debate to perfect those sections to see where we go from there. This is not the only step that we take in the bill that came out of Senate Ways and Means on renewables. Massachusetts currently has a renewable portfolio standard. We have since that Restructuring Act in 1997. In 2008, in the Green Communities Act, we increased the rate of growth in the renewable portfolio standard to 1% a year. Today, if you are a competitive supplier in Massachusetts, or if you are a provider of basic electric service, 11% of the energy that you procure has to come from Class 1 renewable resources. If we did not touch this section, by 2020, that would only grow to 15% of electric load. That is much smaller than many of our surrounding and competitor states are currently growing their renewable portfolio standard. Just recently, Rhode Island chose to increase their renewable portfolio standard to 1.5% growth per year. That would bring them to 40% by 2035. Massachusetts has traditionally been a leader on this front, and in the bill that is before the legislature right now, we would increase our renewable portfolio standard growth to 2% a year. We would double the renewable portfolio standard. That would bring us to 37% by 2030. It would keep us going faster than our neighbors to the south in Rhode Island. It would bring us closer to other leading clean energy states like California, which will have their RPS hit 50% by 2030. This step creates the market visibility for renewable energy developers, but also the incentive and space for many of the renewable programs that we all have seen the benefits of in our district. Should be said, without the RPS, we would never have the space for the solar renewable energy credit program. We wouldn't have the space for the SREC. So this is an important and a significant change in policy and growth. But investing in renewables isn't enough to tackle the problems that I outlined at the beginning. We also need to change the way our grid works. Too often, the way our grid works hasn't actually worked for consumers, and it hasn't actually worked for the environment. The way the grid works now, we have to build to peak demand. We have to have enough power online for the day in the summer when all the air conditioners are running, when all of our devices are plugged in, when all of the dishwashers are running, you name it. That is incredibly expensive to keep that demand on standby, to be able to call it and bring it up. And more often than not, the type of resources that are on standby and able to be called at that time are the dirtiest resources in our existing fleet. So it cuts against our desire to help consumers. It fights against our desire to make our grid cleaner and more efficient. So what we do in this bill is require the Department of Energy Resources to set targets and goals for our electric distribution companies, for the utilities, and to enact policies to procure and promote cost-effective energy storage systems. Energy storage is the technology that has the most promise to change how our grid operates and works. If it is properly deployed, it can bring down those peak needs. We would not need to keep those older, dirtier parts of our fleet. It could be good for consumers and good for the environment, and it is precisely the type of technology that we have innovators across Massachusetts working on right now. On top of all of these things, it maximizes the benefit of the investments that we have made in renewables. We have been through many debates about the challenges about bringing renewables onto our grid, because the sun doesn't always shine right when we're using all our devices. The wind doesn't always blow right when we're using all of our devices. But if we can capture that energy, store that energy, then we can deploy that energy in a more efficient and more effective pattern. We also envision in this bill a study about the future of our electric grid. The Department of Public Utilities has done good work with their grid modernization dockets, which are aimed at bringing in technologies like like energy storage, better incorporating distributed renewable resources and other resources, but we need to take that to the next step. We need to take that to the next level. And so we have a study that brings together the best of what DOER and DPU are doing to amp up our efforts on grid modernization, to bring us more in line with what states like New York and California are doing, New York in particular, with the REV process. So we need to invest in renewables. We need to begin to change how our grid operates and works to get the most out of that and to make our grid work in a more efficient and more effective manner. But we also need to double down on what has been one of the great success stories in the work, the bipartisan work, that has gone on in this chamber around energy efficiency. Massachusetts, and say it with me, we've all heard it too many times, is first in the nation in energy efficiency. We should be proud of that, but we should not rest on our laurels because of that. Being better than bad, which is what 49 other states are right now, is not good enough. if we are going to hit those targets, according to the Attorney General and plenty others, including many of my colleagues here in this chamber, we know that we need to do much more with energy efficiency. And quite frankly, while there is still a great deal of low-hanging fruit, we need to change how we go about doing that. So the Senate bill takes 2 steps on efficiency thus far, and certainly may take more depending on which of the amendments we choose to adopt as a group here together. We would require that at the point of sale, individuals have a home energy audit done at least 3 years in advance, or somewhere in the 3 years in advance to the sale of a home, and also that the Department of Energy Resources would create an energy label not dissimilar to the miles per gallon sticker that we see on all of our cars, so that consumers have the information to determine when they buy a home what are some of the costs that they may incur. I understand that this is a change. It is a change from how we have currently done business. But I also think that it is a simple, straightforward way to encourage more people to take advantage of our free home energy audits. Let me say that again, our free home energy audits. And in so doing, it provides them with the information in a transparent fashion so that they can choose if they want to make upgrades on that home or not. And by the way, many of those upgrades are subsidized through our existing energy efficiency programs. So I am sure we will have some debate and discussion about that, but I think this is a step about making sure that folks have the information that they need, that it is provided in a transparent fashion, and that consumers go into a significant purchase knowing all of the potential costs that could confront them if they buy a home. Along with that, on energy efficiency, we have a task force that is established to determine what are the next steps in our energy efficiency programs. As many of my colleagues know, in 2008, to manage the funds that we pay for out of our electric bills, we established the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. That council is the governing body that determines, either approves, amends, or rejects the utility company's 3-year energy efficiency programs. Those have to come before the EAC and then they move forward. The 3-year plan that has just been approved builds on the success that we have had here in Massachusetts. But this is also a great time to revisit that process and determine how do we want to move forward. Much has changed since 2008 in energy, in efficiency, in information technology. I think it is the proper time and place to determine not just how we've been successful, but how we have fallen short, how we can do better, how we can make those programs more customer-facing, more market-based, more responsive to the variety of different demands and needs that exist in the 351 cities and towns that we represent. Those are the major components of this bill. Continuing to invest in renewables and building on that work. Changing the way our grid operates and being able to bring in new technologies that will maximize the benefits of the investments that we have made. And then continuing our leadership on energy efficiency by focusing on transparency, by focusing on consumer protection, and also by thinking big about what could come next. Let me begin to wrap up my remarks, Mr. President, by saying this. None of us should think that any one bill is going to solve the climate crisis here in Massachusetts, in New England, or beyond. The steps that are in this bill are necessary, but they are not sufficient. We have more work to do, both as a body here and future legislatures will have more work to do. I am convinced that with these steps, along with the tools the current administration already has through the energy efficiency programs and others, that we can hit our 2020 targets. That does not mean it will be a home run. That does not mean we will go flying by them. It will be close, and we will have to continue to keep oversight on the administration and to demand that they follow through on the powers that they have and use those in the most effective way possible. But more steps will need to be taken, especially to hit those goals in 2030, 2040, 2050, and beyond. Whether that is carbon pricing, whether that is any number of other steps, we absolutely need to come up with a way to hit those goals. No one should leave this chamber today thinking that we have solved the problem. The only way to solve the problem is to continue to come back into this body, especially after the Supreme Judicial Court's decision under Kane, to continue the work that we have done since the Green Communities Act was passed, to invest in renewables, to invest in efficiency, and then to bring in new tools, including putting a price on carbon and many others. Those are the types of steps that we are going to have to take if we want Massachusetts to continue to be a leader, and more importantly than being a leader, if we want to solve the problem. And I know all of us here want to solve the problem. We will have debates today about how, but I don't question anyone's desire to solve the problem. I know we want to solve the problem. What we have no longer is the luxury that our colleagues in the past had, which was that you could do an energy bill and then come back to the topic a decade later. Those days are long gone. We not only will have to revisit energy policy, we will have to look at transportation policy, we will have to look at housing and development policy. We will have to look at all of these policies through the lens of climate and hopefully with an eye towards cost, effectiveness, and efficiency. And I know that my colleagues are up to it because they have offered 107 incredible ideas on how to improve the work that is already before us. So, Mr. President, I look forward to continuing the debate, not just here today, but every day moving forward, because the days of simply leaving this chamber and saying we have dealt with this issue are long gone. The days of dealing with this issue every day are here, and they call on all of us to do our best. I am sure, based on the work that this body has done, that we will do our best today, but we will have to do so continuing to move forward. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleagues for the suggestions that they've offered, and I look forward to working with them to put forward the best bill possible. Thank you, Mr. President.